Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Seabass of WNWS in Jackson, Tennessee. This episode sponsored by the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water. The Well is a coffee house with the mission to bring clean water to the world. To date, over 30 communities across the globe have access to safe water, health, and hope. You can make an impact by visiting a Well Coffee House. You can find them in Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, and Bellevue. You can get more information at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We also thank our presenting co-sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Our news presented by Sutherland & Belk, a local injury law firm committed to helping those who've been injured in accidents. If you or someone you know has been in a wreck or other accident, reach out to Sutherland & Belk, see what your rights are. You can find their contact info online at sbinjurylaw.com. Well, the MLB playoffs have started, and once again, there's a Vanderbilt presence. Walker Buehler will be a starting pitcher for the Dodgers with a very important role in LA's series. And, of course, Dansby Swanson is the starting shortstop for the Atlanta Braves. The guest line presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on Boll & Branch sheets for almost 6 years now. They are fantastic. See what you're missing. Give them a try. They're fair trade certified. That means they're made under safe conditions by men and women, treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you're not going to want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That's spelled BOLL. Enter the promo code Vandy and get $50 off your first set of sheets. Seabass joins us now from WNWS in Jackson, Tennessee on this 62nd day of August. How are you doing, my friend?
Calm down over there. It is hot, dude. Oh, God.
97 today. 97. This is crazy.
Yes, I know. But the good news is, my friend, is that better days are just around the corner. It's supposed to be beautiful this weekend.
Allegedly.
Well, that's all I got. I mean, it either will be or it won't be, at least. But for right now, I mean, the forecast looks absolutely fantastic. Kind of the kind of forecast you like to spend in the Grove on a Saturday night.
Yeah, I will be in Pigeon Forge / Sevierville. We have scheduled a family vacation with my parents, so I will be watching that one from TV up in that area and probably seeding my yard right before we leave. Or aerating at least, which will be just fun since it's not rained in like 2 months.
Well, we've all been there.
Have we?
Man. No, I'm lying. I'm trying to make you feel better.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, man. Let's do this, man. I'm ready. I feel like it's been 2 months since the last podcast for some reason. I'm itching a little bit.
It does kind of feel that way. By the way, I got somebody said something nice about you this morning. In fact, I'll read you the text. I will not identify the texture, if that's even a word. But he said,
a word.
We were talking about the podcast. He said, listening to Seabass is so soothing, makes me so happy.
Man, why can't that be Anne Hathaway sending you that text? You know what I'm saying?
You're not going to start like a Seabass After Dark now, are you?
Start that. Son, that podcast has been going for years.
I think that's what I don't want to hear.
Oh, you really do. Trust me. I got a lot of things to say. Well, I don't know who sent that, but molto grazie. That's obrigado. That's a very nice thing to say, and I certainly appreciate it. Chris makes it quite easy.
I thought you were going to break out into full-on Spanish there for a minute. You have been known to do that.
No, that was Portuguese.
Whatever.
Right there. Yeah, it was Portuguese.
That was very funny.
Hey, thank you, brother. Thank you, man. Yeah, and thank you for that text, whoever that was. Let me ask you one clue. Have I ever heard of this person?
No.
All right.
But
that's all I got.
Yeah,
I'm done. Have a great day.
Well, let's move on. Well, they beat Northern Illinois. We haven't had a win to talk about in a long time other than baseball, so let's start there.
Oh, we can certainly do that, man. golly, Bill, that is true. It is October. We still didn't have a win until the end of September. But you know what? Onward and upward. One thing, look, don't get me wrong. There was a lot to dislike about Saturday. There were some things to like about Saturday. The start was fantastic. After that, not so much. But you know what? And it didn't solve anything, but it did quench a little thirst just for a dub. Chris, this team needed a win. I mean, I don't care if it was Aardvark Tech. They needed a win. Northern Illinois, I'm not going to pretend like they're some great team, but they're respectable, and it was a win. This team needed it. They had to hold on to get it done against a MAC team, but Chris, they got it done. And there's not much better in athletic competition than what it feels like after winning. And as somebody said astutely on the board a couple of months ago, or a month or so ago, I remember reading, and it was just so absolutely true, is how hard it is to win a football game? How many things you have to do, the preparation that it takes to go in to win a football game. There's a lot of work involved. And, I'll take that for right now. It's not acceptable. It's not enough. Gets nobody off the hook. But I don't plan on wallowing in the mire of a win. Can't do that.
What did you see that you liked the most?
I like the wheels of Keon Brooks. That was really good. I thought that for a guy who was playing high school football this time last year, I think Davey is really to deal with for the next 4 years. And I don't know about you, but other than Adam Butler, we haven't had anybody like him in a long time. And I think he is only going to progress and continue to get better. And teams are going to have to start figuring out ways to not yet, but eventually if the growth continues like I think it will, they're going to have to account for him, And as you start piecing some of the pieces together there, there's a real opportunity there. No question about it. I really like what I saw out of him. And here's another one for you. Man, how good has Harrison Smith been? I really like this cat. I was so concerned with our punting, and look, I'm not saying he's the best in the conference, but I really like Harrison Smith. I think he's done a pretty good job so far. So I've been pretty pleased with him.
I want to circle back to running back. Okay. I'm starting to wonder because we didn't see Javian Marlowe at all last week. I mean, it is way too premature for one of these pronouncements, but that's starting to worry me. I think he's got a knee issue, and what I was told in fall camp was he'd be fine. They'd probably have him for the start of the season or close to it, and I think they ran him out, for a few plays in the LSU game, maybe. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but the guy hadn't touched the ball at this point. I still maintain I think he's a really good player potentially, but that is one thing that started to worry me a little bit.
I mean, look, it's worrisome either way because, one, if it's injury, that really sucks. But the other side of it is if it's not, because I remember you were gushing over that dude. And I know you know what you're looking at. So you were gushing over that. This guy's got one of those things, some days he flashes even in the brief time that you've seen him enough to know that he's the kind of guy that we don't generally get. But it'd be good to, from an explosive standpoint, to have a guy like that to complement Key. And that just hasn't happened. I mean, does he have 10 carries in his career yet total?
No, I don't think he's got – I know he doesn't have 10 touches in his career. I don't think he's got 5. And by the way, from my eyes, he's better than Brooks. Not that Brooks can't be a good player, but Javion's got just a little bit of a wiggle and a shimmy to him that I don't think that I've seen from Keon. Of course, I've not seen a lot of Keon in practice. I saw him get a few touches, and I think I said on the board at the time in our practice reports, this kid's got some speed to him. But the sample size I've seen him and Marlowe, I still like Marlowe better. And I like Brooks too, but that's what I think he can be. That's how I think those two stack up.
Now, the thing about Brooks, though, game-wise, of course, we really didn't see much of anything enough to know anything about Marlowe either, but from last year. But the one thing about Brooks is, now, when he had the space, you saw what he looks like. His other carries, I don't know if you really noticed it. There was nothing there. I mean, he was met either in the backfield or there was very few holes. Most of it was in between the tackle or just rubbing right off like a C gap or something like that. I haven't had a chance to see a whole lot of him in space at all. You know what he could do. Not really a hole to hit, but the one time we saw that, I mean, you said, "Ooh, boy, this guy can get." You know, of course, I mean, most running backs should have had a touchdown on that play, but he flashed right there. I haven't had enough time to see him in space or with any type of hole to run through to know whether or not he can do anything.
You know, speaking of the blocking and the offensive line, I'd not thought of this until just now, but Jonathan Stewart did not play at all Saturday, which I thought he would get some reps somewhere. He did not. And Devin Cochran played okay. In fact, Devin threw a really nice block on the run to Spring Brooks. He pulled out or didn't pull, but he had a linebacker on the second level and sealed him off, and that just made for this gaping hole. And once he hit that, they weren't going to stop him. But we talked last week, and not to say that this cannot materialize, that they can't reshuffle the deck and do it differently, but it is really weird that the game that Cochran comes back, they actually graded out worse at left tackle on the whole. And I didn't think Devin, he graded well in pass blocking. There were a couple times I didn't think he did a great job with it, but Pro Football Focus gave him a really high grade. But they just didn't generate a lot of great holes beyond that. I was disappointed in the way that the line played, and it was hot. But, you know, the heat bothers Northern Illinois too.
I'm going to give Devin Cochran a pass at everything in that first game. I mean, he's coming back at the quarter pole in his first game. If there's issues with Devin Cochran 2 games from now, okay. If he has trouble this weekend in Oxford, okay. But that first game out, he gets a mulligan from me, unless he was just god awful, which he wasn't.
No, and I'm not trying to throw shade at Devin Cochran. Devin Cochran has got to be part of the solution, and if he's not, then it's going to be a long year. But I do wonder more that the guards, neither Sage Young nor Cole Clemens graded well, and I do wonder if that moving Steen to inside deal that we talked about doesn't have to become a reality, because Stewart played really well those last 2 games. And right now, any lineman that plays well, you got to have that guy in there. Devin Cochran will play well. I'm pretty confident of that, unless the injury is still bothering him. But that was one thing we thought, like, okay, hey, now they're getting Cochran back, so the line should be better, and it really was not.
Did anyone at the press conference at all ask why Jonathan Stewart did not play?
No, because I don't think any of us realized it at the time. I mean, it didn't occur to me till just now.
Because that's a little bit strange. I mean, linemen, look, quarterbacks, are not the only people that need to get in a flow. Linemen do too. Players need reps, and if you feel like he played good enough in the previous outing, he's got to make. I mean, I get it. The game was close, but the question becomes how big a drop is Tyler Steen and Devin Cochran to Jonathan Stewart. Now, which I don't know the answer to that. I haven't seen enough of Jonathan Stewart in game situation to accurately be able to monitor, to analyze that. But, I do know this. Jonathan needs game reps. There's no doubt.
Yeah, and by the way, just to that, I'm looking at run block grades. And this is according to Pro Football Focus. Their graders, I'm sure, are imperfect. They do not know the assignments that the players are supposed to execute, so they may misinterpret a play based on that. But I would think if they were spectacular, then that would be evident. And here are run blocking grades for the interior of their line. Sage Young got a 53, Cole Clemens got a 47.7, and Grant Miller got a 49.9. 60 is kind of that mark that says, okay, if you're 60, you did an okay job. Anything below that or above that is where you start saying good or bad accordingly. So anything below 60 is where you really did not do well, and all 3 of those guys, according to their grades, did not do well.
I would love to see that process, how they do that. I mean, do they take an entire game worth of film and like literally just focus on one player and just watch every play together and come up with a cumulative grade, and then start to film all over and go to the next player and do the exact same thing? I mean, I wonder how that works.
I don't know. I don't think it can be quite that detailed because I think they get the grades out too fast for it to be that way. And again, these guys are prone to mistakes like everybody else, but I would think that the mistakes would kind of be in the same direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I can't imagine the variance being super huge, And what I also wonder is how many people are in charge of grading a person.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they have a checker, but here's the thing, like last year, who were their best two offensive linemen according to Pro Football Focus?
For last year, I would certainly think Devin Cochran would be one of them. Not Devin. Well, yeah, maybe no. Justin School.
It was School and Reagan, and Cochran was
Bruno
third.
Reagan. Yeah, School and Reagan for sure.
So, and I mean, my point is that they may get some stuff wrong, but with that, the cream usually rises to the top. Now, where I see some things that I disagree with, like I think Zach Cunningham, his All-American year, graded out lower than what the eye test showed. So, I mean, they get some stuff wrong, I think, but it is what it is. I mean, we all get stuff wrong. And it's,
sure.
Over a sample size of hundreds of snaps over the season, I wouldn't think they'd be far off on most guys.
No, I wouldn't think so. But that is interesting. Next time you get Derek Mason in front of a microphone, maybe you ask why Jonathan Stewart didn't play.
Yeah, we'll try to do that maybe next Tuesday if he does not play. But I mean, I can understand it. I mean, I think they're probably thinking, Cochran is our left tackle and Steen is our right tackle, and those are our guys. And if they don't want to take them off the field, they don't want to take them off the field. But I thought maybe, especially with the Heat, you might see him in reserve, and maybe they are working on moving him inside. I don't know. Maybe that's a possibility. I have not asked, and I probably need to ask. Derek did indicate that was a possibility, but maybe he's not ready yet.
The game was still in doubt. The game was still in doubt too. So,
but my point is, Stewart had played well enough. He graded really well the previous two games. That I think that if you need a guy to sub, that based on performance, he'd done the job.
Agreed, my friend. What else?
Boy, let's talk defense. I thought that actually, in terms of getting the job done, did it. In fact, I think I graded them a B because they gave up 18 points, and that's the bottom line. But just, man, the way Northern Illinois threw on them the second half and the fact that they just still can't stop anybody's passing game is just so concerning.
Yeah, by the way, speaking of that, the latest on DC, what do we know?
I'm guessing he is out.
For the foreseeable future, for Saturday night?
For Saturday night. In fact, I'm glad you said that. When I went to print out the depth charts yesterday, they had not put those online, and I forgot to check back, so I may even do that while we're talking. But the weird thing is their backups are grading out better than the starters pretty consistently.
That is a little bit weird. By the way, before I forget this, because I'll go back to the defense, but man, there was a play in that game Saturday where, and I think it was closer to the fourth quarter. You may remember this play where Keyshawn got hit in first contact with maybe about 2 yards down the field. And it looked for the world like he was going to go down, and his knee just missed scraping the ground, and he had the body control and the strength kind of pick himself back up and keep going and squirt for about another 6-7 yards. Do you happen to remember the play that I'm talking about?
Not off the top of my head. Sorry.
That dude right there, I'm telling you, that's the kind of body control, man. He is such an NFL running back, Chris. I don't think there's any question about it. This is my favorite running back of all time there, with all apologies to the greats that came before him. This guy, I mean, he just has something that you either have or you don't. Love watching that guy play. His body control is absolutely amazing, and I thought that was a big part. Now, back to the defensive side of the ball. Here's my question to you, because I don't know enough about Northern Illinois coming into that game. Is 18, is that acceptable? Is that as far as an output for the Huskies? How did that relate in regards to comparing it to the other games? Now, I did see the game against Nebraska and Lincoln. I saw the second half of that game because I wanted to get an idea of what Northern Illinois was. But what about the other game?
Well, they got 8 against Nebraska, and I think 2 of that was on a safety. Then they got 14. Well, I'll look it up. By the way, and we'll circle back to this in a minute. While you were talking, I did find the depth chart. DC Williams is not listed on there at all, which is not good.
No, that's not.
Let me look this up. They scored a few on Utah, but it wasn't. I think it was about what they got against Fane. And Utah's defense is really good.
Oh, no question. It's very good.
Okay, they only got 24 against Illinois State. They got 17 on Utah, 8 on Nebraska, and then, of course, 18 on Vanderbilt. So, I mean, it's not I think it's within the range of outcomes where you say it was an acceptable performance, but it's not, would you probably rather seen them give up 10, of course?
I think the issue that I have is, and you may disagree, I don't know. Now, the first quarter, I mean, golly, Bill, that looked like what everybody wants to see this team do. I mean, they looked like they were in complete control of that football game, and they were. The problem that I have is, the second half of the second quarter was the rest of the game. I couldn't tell the difference between Northern Illinois and Van. I be able to tell the difference physically, speed-wise, and really just in almost all facets of the game. And really, there wasn't a whole heck of a lot of difference between those two teams. And that concerned me a little bit. I mean, look, there were good things. Those first 2 drives were magical. They were. I was really happy about that. But for the rest of the way, I didn't see a whole lot of difference.
No, I didn't either. In fact, I thought Northern Illinois' defensive line was probably better than Vanderbilt's, at least in terms of playing the run. I just don't think Vanderbilt's back 7 is very fast. Do you?
No, not really. I mean, if they all haven't seen it, so far. By the way, help me remember something, because these games lap over into each other. Was it this game or the previous game where Brendan Harris had that massive hit?
I believe it was the Northern Illinois game, and he had also, I believe, a career high in snaps in that one.
So what do we think? Are we starting to see? Because I mean, he was pretty coveted cat, man. Out of Chattanooga Baylor, and I kind of been waiting for him to come on, and that was one heck of a stick. Do we think there's a chance we start seeing him more?
I think that's very possible. He's listed as the starter this week in an Orr situation with Tay Daly, but he is listed first. And generally speaking, the player they list first in an Orr is the guy who is the starter.
All right, let me ask you a question. This is not a trick question. I'm just curious what your opinion is. And it can only be people who are playing right now. The leader of this secondary is?
Probably Frank Coppett, who, speaking of which, is also not listed on the depth chart this week, which I'm not surprised. He's had a major knee injury that he has played through or tried to play through, and I think he must have hurt it against Saturday. He was not in pads in the second half, and now to not see him on the depth chart kind of tells me a lot of what I need to know. And this is me speculating here, but I think that was a pretty serious knee injury before the season that he suffered. I was shocked to see him back as soon as he came back, and I wonder now if he's hurt it again and not on the depth chart, if maybe that's not the last we see of him, or at least for a while.
Well, I'd hate to see that. I like Frank.
Yeah, now, Frank is, from what I've told, and in fact, it's funny that you asked me, because I asked somebody that, or that came up in conversation at random, and I think that he might even be considered the leader on the defense or one of them. But that's the guy that, in terms of leadership, I've heard is sort of the man there.
All right, so before we take a look at Ole Miss, of course, there's something that we got to talk. We just got to talk about it. Now, I'm sure you probably talked about it on a couple of podcasts this week, but they hadn't been with me, and I want to chat about it. We got to talk about number 80, Chris.
Yeah.
We got to talk about number 80. There's that fine line, man. I mean, everybody wants everybody to be a great teammate, and all for the team. And hey, I subscribe to that. I do. But I got to be honest with you, man. I mean, we're talking about a guy who came back to improve his draft status. And he had, 1 target, 2 targets, the whole football game? I don't care what the situation is. When you have one of the 3 or 4 best tight ends in all of America, he has to have the targets. Yeah, he has to have the targets. Now, I'm not an opponent of pouting on the field and letting everybody look, if the people in the press box, the people can stand outside of jubilation, from a big play, if they can read your body language and know what's going on in that situation, that's a problem. I don't like the way he handled it, but frankly, you have to get 80 the ball. It's a failure on your part. I don't care what is going on. If that man has 2 targets in the entire game, that's a failure.
I'm thinking back to watching Riley Neal's films at Ball State. I saw a couple of full games. And look, I like Riley a lot. I want to see Riley do really well. Riley is just a terrific kid by everybody's account. So I don't mean to pile on him here, but when I saw them play, I did not really think a lot of his receiving core and sort of chalked up his performance to the fact that he didn't have a lot of talent there. Now I wonder if in watching Riley Neal, if some of it is just Riley Neal does not like to throw far downfield.
And somebody posted they didn't think Riley liked to throw in between the hashes either. I'm not really interested in what Riley Neal likes to throw or where he likes to throw it. I don't care what he likes to do. The fact of the matter is you have the type of weapon that can exploit a defense. And if I'm Jerry Godowski, I'm snatching him up and saying, let me tell you something, find 80. Now, if 80's never open, that's on 80, but I promise I'm looking for him. And I don't care how Riley Neal feels about if that's the case. If that's the case and he doesn't like throwing in between the hashes, too bad. Do it anyway. You got a player. And think about that. Look, if we love to target tight ends, in recruiting. It's a big part of what we do. They're watching this. They're seeing this. These cats are looking at this and saying, well, I thought y'all used the tight end. Well, no, not really. Not these days, because our quarterback doesn't like to throw to them, or doesn't like to throw downfield, or doesn't like to throw in between the hashes. Too bad. Do it anyway. Make it happen. Now, unless we are shredding people to death everywhere else, and we're moving up and down the field, and there's nothing they can do about it, okay. I hear you got to still find a way to get 80 involved. But if that's even a possibility as far as reasoning goes, it's completely unacceptable.
Speaking of which, how much I like Ben Bresnahan based on camp in spring camp 2 years. I think Ben is a really good looking pass catching tight end. I don't know if they've targeted him in the passing game all season.
That just can't happen. Again, that's what I'm talking about, man. And Ben's got good hands. I mean, he's another guy that I've heard you rave about. And it's not that, it's not that they're not capable, that we don't have the opportunity. We're just simply not looking at them right now. And I don't know what that is, because they're such an integral part of our offense. I mean, if it's not or is somebody performing so well that it makes it okay to ignore that position? I haven't seen that.
And let me get to I don't know how to call it the elephant in the room, but something along those lines. I have, as you know, have been super impressed with their skill players. Marlowe, Bresnahan, Amir Abdul-Rahman, all these kids that I've talked about, said, I think these kids are a different cut from what Vanderbilt gets. And I think you kind of learn how to interpret practice things once you've been to practice for 15, 16, 17 years, which is kind of the territory that I've been in now. But at the same time, man, these guys on this team right now can't cover much of anybody. And so maybe do they look a little better because of who the opposition was in practice? I mean, I'm sure that didn't hurt. I still think these are skilled kids, but if I'm wrong about that, then I'll feel pretty silly because the secondary right now is not getting it done. I still think that these kids are good, but it does give me a little bit of pause with some of these things not translating to games. Now, having said that, they haven't exactly been on the cutting edge of offensive innovation this year. The issues with Neal not throwing downfield on the offensive line could explain some of that. But I think the bottom line is this, man. Coaching is about figuring out, okay, you got these parts and you're maximizing your talent. That's your job. And they're not maximizing their talent. I mean, right now they were number 100 in points scored nationally. And that's with 2 defensive touchdowns. So take those out, and I'm guessing, they're 115 or so. It's just, I still think, I understand the whys, but after 6 years of coaching staff, the whys start to become a whole lot less important, and really the question is the whats. And the what is, after we're finally thinking they're turning the corner with offense, who knows? I mean, they got a long way to go between now and the end of the year, that's for sure.
You got that right. So before we move on to Ole Miss, what about 80, man? What do you think?
I mean, you have to get him involved. I just do not see. I don't see them using the middle of the field behind the linebackers a lot, and to me, that's where he ought to be just ruling things.
But what I'm asking is his response.
Oh, I didn't like his response. I can understand his frustration, but here's the thing. You're a leader of that team, and I've said this in an earlier podcast, so I'm repeating, but you have not heard this. You got to be better than that. I understand your frustration. I understand that your draft stock is probably taking a tumble. And I totally get that, completely. But in that moment, you've got to act better than that.
I agree, and it doesn't do any good for anybody. Look, it's one of those things where, you know what, if you want to walk into Jerry Godowski and Derek Mason's office, Derek says the door is always open. Well, walk in and talk to him. But it does nobody good when you visibly show that type of frustration. Everybody sees it. The other players are going to be talking about it. It's not the kind of thing that you want resonating through a locker room. I don't have a problem with him being frustrated at all. In fact, I'd have a problem if he wasn't. Because frankly, he's losing a lot of money right now, and he's better than that. There's no doubt about it. But I would say this, I think that you could make the argument, but probably not. I say this, but as I'm thinking about it, probably not if you're an NFL team. Not really. If you see if you see his skill set, it may not thwart you. But my first thought was his reaction could cost him as much as the lack of targets. But at the same time, I think maybe NFL scouts are looking at this and saying, well, hell, I'd be frustrated too. Get him the football.
I think once NFL scouts dig in on him, I think they'll find that was just a frustrated kid having a bad day. I don't think that that's indicative of who he is at all. I think Jared is a really mature kid and a kid who I do think thinks of other people. I just think he was having a bad day and it got caught on camera. Now, having said that, I think they have a bigger issue. Think about this. Okay. Part of the appeal to Vaughn, Pinckney, and Lipscomb, all those kids, was come back and improve your draft stock, right? Which I get that on a football team, your objective is to win football games and not to worry about what each individual game and drive does to somebody's pro stock. But at the same time, you've got to balance that if you're going to continue to get those kids. And their offense, they play Seabass at such a slow tempo when you're getting 54 snaps a game, which is what they got. Now, that's even low for them, but here's my point. If you're getting 75, 80, 85 snaps like some of these high-tempo offenses do, there's a lot more targets to go around. And I think the Mouse at the end of the day are a lot happier. I think that's another sort of hazard of their offense, the way they run it, is when you're trying to get all these kids touches and you run at a snail's pace, that becomes a whole lot harder.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point, and I can't argue that. But I agree. I think it was a young man having a bad day in a frustrating situation. I'm not holding it against him. It's just I just hate that it came out like that. I really do, because it doesn't really do anyone any good. And and a lot of times, back in the NFL, you've seen the old adage, especially for fantasy players, that a squeaky wheel gets the grease. Wonder if that'll be the case Saturday in Oxford.
Well, and that's where I think everybody has to take a deep breath and say, yeah, we may not like the way he handled it, but he's right. We're not going to win games with him getting one catch for 1 yard.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And I think, look, I'll say this. I know he'll get more targets than he did against Northern Illinois. I don't think that's any question. One, I think he's going to need them, because there's a chance we could be in a track meet. I would say that, man, now how many points did Ole Miss put on Alabama? Was it 33? Something like that?
I think something 30s, like that, yeah.
Now, that would concern me if we – and you could say, well, LSU's defense isn't Alabama's. But, with all the injuries and turnover that Alabama's accrued, Alabama's defense isn't the normal Alabama. Doesn't mean it's not awesome. It's just not the normal one. But I'll say 38 on LSU. So, who knows, man? Maybe we're looking at a big-time track meet with a backup quarterback, a completely brand-new receiving core. Maybe there's a track meet. Maybe something special's brewing Saturday in Oxford, Mississippi. What say you?
Well, I think they better think that way. I think if they're thinking this is a 24-21 grinded-out game, I think they're going to come up on the wrong end.
Agreed. The question is, if it comes down to something like that, can they keep up?
They have to. They have to. I mean, they are not. Can we not rule out now them winning games in the teens and the 20s? Because, well, I mean, I say that they've got some offenses that are challenged coming up. Kentucky, Tennessee, some of those. So I wouldn't say that they couldn't win a game with 21, 24 points. But if you think that way, you're not maximizing your strengths.
Agreed. But I know they have to. The question is, will they? I know they have to.
Well, history tells us no. History tells us no.
We've gone down to Oxford quite a few times and played much better than I expected us to. I just wonder if that victory, that little taste of victory, was enough to jumpstart this football team. I don't know. I mean, there's still a zillion issues, but Ole Miss is hardly a perfect football team. Because, I don't know if you watched that Memphis game. I did. I know Memphis is ranked, and we'd have a hard time beating them because but even they, I mean, to me, they haven't looked like the same Memphis. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch them. I know they haven't lost yet, but they're not the same team to me. Wait, did they lose to Navy? I'm trying to remember.
I think they won, but I think it was close, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's probably what it was. I'm having a hard time remembering right now. But they don't look nearly as impressive as they have to me. And that ended up being, what was that game, 15-10 in that football game. It'll be real interesting to see what happens. I mean, they put a backup quarterback out there, and I don't know, Chris. What are your thoughts? Would you rather see Coral in this game?
Man, here's the thing, and I got to ask this question in a mailbag thing. I just don't see they can't stop anything right now. If a team wants to run, they run. If a team wants to throw, they throw. And if they play the mobile kid, whose name escapes me at the moment, there's no reason to think, given how slow they've looked on defense, that he wouldn't run over them. I don't really know. It's kind of like teams right now just kind of have to pick their poison and say, we do this best, and that's what we're going to do. And based on what I've seen, they can't stop any of it.
Well,
I mean, I know that's a very pessimistic take, but am I wrong?
Yeah. Well, no, Chris, I wouldn't expect anything else out of you, man. You know better than that. No, I mean, you're just preaching the truth here. But, their defense can't stop much either. Of course, I understand last week was Alabama. I'm well aware of that. But, what if I asked you the question that if Georgia played Ole Miss today in Oxford, could they hold Georgia to 30 points?
I don't think so.
Probably not. Then I have to ask the question, is Ole Miss's offense, if we play it as it lies this very second, how much of difference is there between this offense and Vanderbilt's offense?
Ole Miss's offense?
Ole Miss's offense.
Well, right now, Ole Miss's offense is better than Vanderbilt's. I mean, based on the season. I'm not saying that it is. And look, hear me out here. I'm not saying the season is lost.
On Memphis, Chris.
Oh, they scored
10 points on Memphis.
They scored how many on Alabama?
33. We scored 38 on LSU.
Okay, well, Vanderbilt's not scored more than 24 against anybody, including Northern Illinois.
Well, they scored 38 on LSU, so I don't know what to tell you.
The offense.
And I know you're talking about offense. I get all that. But still, they still hung up the Alabama and LSU defensively at this moment.
Well, I'll say what I've said for a while. Is there a team in there that can completely change the trajectory of the season and look better than this team has looked? Absolutely. I mean, you look at the way they played like garbage the middle portion of last year, and they came out okay at the end. I'm not ruling that out. I'm just telling you, based on what I have seen of this team this year, they got to turn over a new leaf fast, man.
I agree. I'll just say this. I don't think there is a hill of beans difference between these two football teams. Now, for us, we've watched every second of every Vanderbilt football game. You haven't watched every second of every Ole Miss football game. But I will say this. They've had more impressive moments. And really, it's not the Alabama game and putting up 33. I thought they put up one heck of a good fight against a pretty darn good Cal team. I mean, Cal's not a great football team, but they're a pretty good football team. And Ole Miss had a chance to win that game in the fourth quarter. Now, that's something that Vanderbilt could do this year, but based on the play so far, I wouldn't suspect that would be the case. So I think Vanderbilt has to play their best game. But I mean, this is one of those deals where in Vanderbilt's case, now the injuries are starting to pile up a little bit, but we haven't even come close to seeing. At least I hope not. Because if we have, then this team's screwed, or they may win 3 games. But this team hasn't even come close to their best football. Not even close. In fact, it's been kind of the opposite. But what happened? Well, let me ask you this. The team that played in the second half against Georgia, and you could say, hey, Georgia called the dogs off. And maybe that's true to an extent. Maybe it's not. But I know that team in the second half played much better football. What about the team in the first quarter against Northern Illinois? It flashes to the potential this team sort of has. I don't think they're completely inept. Some of the other football has been absolutely inept. But you're playing an opponent this week that, on paper, I'd say Ole Miss is a little bit better, but not much. This is a pretty even matchup. Chris, what's the line on this game?
The line is 7.5.
Vegas thinks the same thing. They think this is I think these two teams are less than a touchdown apart. When you have to throw in the home field advantage for that they're less than a possession apart. And I agree with them.
Here is what I sort of see as the difference. Vanderbilt's offense is more talented than Ole Miss's, but it's not playing like it right now. I don't think that Ole Miss's
Right.
defense is very talented, but listen to this. They're giving up 5.9 a play. They're only giving up 3.3 on the ground. I don't think, I mean, the thing that I've heard about Ole Miss for the last couple of years is they don't have any defensive talent. Well, but they've found a coordinator in Mike McIntyre who's
True.
able to take some things and improve their performance. They just don't have that at all on the defensive side of the ball. I just don't think that coaching seems to be doing them any favors on that side. Now, I will say this. One thing that I did like is I think that they got after the passer a little bit more in spells. And they run blitz more. I think it was effective at times, so that was encouraging. But I just think that unless they are willing to go all out and run some tempo and pull out some stops and be a little more creative and use some motion and some things, they just seem to get suckered into these kind of games where they seem to think that they're going to win some kind of a defensive slugfest, and they slow it down on offense. And right now, they're not stopping anybody in anything. And until they realize that, I just don't see. This just has the profile of one of those. Oh boy, they were so close, and if this had been the break they'd have gotten, they could have won, but they didn't. And that I just think over time. Even and I'm not saying you're wrong. Again, I do think that there's a better football team in here if the coaches can get it out of them and figure some things out. Because the Big Three, that's a lot of talent, man. I don't care what else you got. That's a lot of talent, and we've seen it. But we're a third of the way in the season now, and the slivers of hope that you have picked out from this season are based on pretty small sample sizes of them doing something well. There's not been a really large body of work on the whole to be encouraged about.
Freely admit that other than Florida, by far the heart of this part of their schedule is behind them.
Oh, no doubt.
This is where, Chris, a game against LSU and Georgia doesn't tell me how good this football team. Barely winning a game against Northern Illinois doesn't tell me how this team is. The Ole Misses, the Kentuckys, the Tennessees, I would say South Carolina, and I'm not listening to the whole. I get it. They never having success against South Carolina. I just think South Carolina's still a better team than they are. And this freshman quarterback that's come in for Bentley has been pretty darn good. I don't think they're winning that football game, but they're beating UNLV. They're beating ETSU. But the measuring stick for me is these other mid-rung to lower-rung teams that, the Kentucky who can't get anything going offensively right now. Those games are all there for them. They're sitting right in front of them, right there for them. I'll find out more about this team when we start playing teams that are closer to our level. Georgia and LSU were not on their level. And look, they took a beating to Georgia, even though it was only 30-6. And the very next week to try to come back and recover from Purdue was tough. And yes, you could say that Purdue lost to Nevada. I'm quite aware of that. I understand all that. But I'm willing to take those things into account and take a look at what happens once they hit mediocre SEC play because, hey, at the end of the day, I can kid myself, that's who we are.
Yeah, I agree. I just would have, again, this is going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, okay? I had a hard time criticizing them for beating Northern Illinois. They won that by 6 points. They didn't play horrible, but when you go back and you take the entirety of the season and saying you wanted to see a team that could really put its foot on the gas against somebody and dominate in stretches and do some things really well, we just still haven't seen it on balance for the season, and that's what I'm saying.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that. I agree with that 100%, my friend.
And I'm just, I don't judge them. The reverse is true. You don't judge, and you see this happen in baseball. The standard is so high that people judge them on a really small sample size, or their bullpen was atrocious or whatever, and it goes the other way. When in the big picture, it was a good team, and it was always a good team. and not that the criticisms aren't valid, but I think it works the reverse in football. Is people cling to the little things that they did well in the little bits and ascribe that to the team and what it could be. And generally, that's not accurate. Now, again, I will make the exception that this year could be different because we have seen it different out of the offense. But boy, we have not out of the defense. And again, I maintain the same thing I said before the season. Until they realize that their identity is going to be outscoring people and taking chances and doing some things to make defenses feel uncomfortable, I just don't see them being a good team. They're going to have to realize that, and I just don't know whether that is in their nature or not. And you know what? If I am wrong, and that's what they do, and they go out and put 50 on Ole Miss and run 80 plays and doing something like that, you know what the podcast next week will be about?
What will it be?
It'll be about how they turned over a new leaf and did things differently and why this worked and why that doesn't work. But we can only go on what we've seen.
True. Good enough. Give me your prediction on this game. Let's get to the mailbag. By the way, got to throw this out there to you. I don't know if you've had a chance to see these videos that Vanderbilt basketball is posting, like on Twitter and whatnot. Have you had a chance to see any of those?
Bits and pieces, yeah.
Okay, so is it me or I don't recognize anybody? I don't know who's who.
No, I've had the same issue at times.
I'm looking at him, and I'm looking at this guy, come out in there, he's shooting, he's playing, and I'm like, I honestly don't know who that is. I mean, I don't need a program as far as who we have. I understand that, but identifying them, I mean, it's interesting to me. I can't wait for basketball season just to see what it looks like understacked. It was interesting to read the report. I think it was David Sisk did it. I was talking about the Frank Cat who talking about house, which is kind of what basketball turned into anyway. So, but yeah, it was just funny to me because every time I watch these videos, like the only one that I recognize is Scottie Pippen. It's just because he looks like Scottie Pippen.
Yeah, it's gonna be a weird year. But I'm with you. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing it just to see what it looks like. I don't think it's going to be very good, but just to get acquainted with who they have and what the skill sets look like, and whether say a Jordan Wright or somebody ends up being a surprise. What are the storylines within this team? Because we just don't know.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I totally agree. And it's one of those deals where, I mean, we lost every SEC game we played last year, Chris. I mean, it's not able to get worse than that. But I want to see how he coaches. I want to see how his players respond. I want to see the players from last year, how much different they are under him in one off season, as they get prepared for this thing, because I think we're a month away, something like that. I want to see that. I mean, this is not about winning the SEC. I'm not stupid. I get all that, but I'm almost excited to the point where just the little things. I don't have to have 12 conference wins, because that's not going to happen. But I just want to see where this team is, and mindset-wise and execution under Jerry Stackhouse in his first season as a college basketball coach.
Yeah, I'm with you. And with that, are you ready for the mailbag?
I am.
The mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. Do you need an insurance agent who wants to know your unique needs and circumstances and will tailor an insurance plan to fit them? Josh is your guy. Call him 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook, facebook.com/JDMintonHQ. He's my agent. Give him a shot. I think you'll be pleased. Mr. Vandy says, if the team gets 3 or 4 wins and Mason returns next season, should he make changes to the staff, or could the AD make that suggestion?
Well, the AD can certainly make that suggestion. Let's see. So if this team wins 3 or 4 more games, that puts them at 4-8 or 5-7. I want to surprise some people here because I know folks know that I like Coach Mason, but I mean, in year 6, that won't be acceptable. And I know they had issues personnel-wise on the offensive line, and they're still trying to put the secondary together and all that. But you know what, Chris? This is year 6. You don't get any excuses anymore. I'll say this. If I'm Malcolm Turner, you're going to have to get to 500 in this season. You're going to have to do it. That's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask. It's certainly doable. There's no doubt, but I mean, because I'm kind of chalking up Florida and South Carolina as losses, which means you've got one more to play with. And then you got to win all those other games. But if I don't get at least 500, it's walking papers for me. I don't want to hear about the extension. I don't care hear about how safe he is. If you're serious about this, you looked out in your stands and you saw nobody. Don't talk to me about how hot it is. It's hot everywhere. You're gonna need at least 500 to keep this gig. Bottom line. And then even then you have to prove. Yeah, I have to know when we sit down at the end of the season. You have to tell me why I have the right guy. There's a lot of things I like about Coach Mason, but I mean, if I don't at least express that, then I'm not being truthful.
Well, he is on his 4th special teams coordinator, his 3rd defensive coordinator. That does include himself. And his 3rd offensive coordinator. I don't know. I mean, absent bringing in some offensive coordinator somewhere who averaged 50 points a game at a major level, I just don't think that I don't see how that would change perception at all. I mean, and look, Derek had the chance. Say what you want about Vanderbilt and the things that it has done, and it has not been committed to football, but you can say this. They have been willing to fork out for coaches' salaries. So if he couldn't get an offensive coordinator that would do some of those things, I think that's on Derek somehow. Either he didn't want it or he couldn't communicate a vision, because I don't think, absent something that's just jaw-dropping change in any coordinator spot, I don't see how that solves anything. I mean, and this is all hypothetical. Maybe they turn it around and finish the season differently, in which case it's a whole different conversation. But answering the question at face value, I don't know how you answer that differently.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, Vanderlee says, Seabass, it was great to see you last year at the Ole Miss game. Are you going to be at the Grove on Saturday? What do we got to do to beat them? The Ole Miss line whiffed a few more times. The offensive line whiffed a few more times for Northern Illinois. I imagine Ole Miss defensive line to be a good bit better, don't you think?
I think yes is the first answer to that. Secondly, there's still a chance that I will be at that game. I'm having to do a whole lot of work here around the house, Chris, to prep myself, because I'm moving a bunch of stuff around, because next week is my shoulder surgery. So I'm going to have to do a whole lot of stuff in preparation for that. So I can't say for certain. I'm still planning on getting down there. Me and a couple of buddies going down there. It just depends on if I can get enough stuff done during the week, because I'm having that shoulder surgery next week. And I need, once I have that, I'm not going to be able to do much of anything. So I'm going to have to get everything that I need to get done this week. So long story short, if I get what I need done in the next couple of days, then yes, I'll be there.
You know, one thing in the question, and I didn't really talk about this much, Northern Illinois did have a couple of really good defenders against the run. So again, when the struggles pile up and you're not doing things well, I think you have to look at the team in the mirror that you're talking about. But that is something worth mentioning, is that team had a couple of really good defensive tackles who were excellent against the run, and I think that showed. We went over what the guards and centers got in run blocking, so let's give some credit where it's due there.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Any parting thoughts? I know you're going to be away a couple of podcasts, it appears, so I know our audience is going to miss you. I will miss you as well. Anything you need to discuss before we end the show today?
Anything that I need to discuss before we end the show today. Let's see. Anything that we did not touch? No, I think I'm good.
And one little housekeeping note. I did not mean to skip Norman Jordan. We will probably do that one and release it on Friday. I've sort of been battling a cold or something that's going around Nashville, so you may even hear it in my voice. I hope not. But for people listening going, why is this the third podcast of the week when it's usually our fourth? Just wanted to throw that out there.
Right. Well, if you're going to make sure you get a podcast done, you better make sure it's mine. That's all I got to say. No, Chris, you sounded very sexy today. Very manly. Good job.
I don't know how to take that, but I'll take it. All right. Tell people where they can find your show, where they can find your Twitter handle, and all those good things.
Yeah, you can find me. My Twitter handle is @CheapSeatsBass. My website is WNWS.com. You can listen to the show live there, the Cheap Seats, 6 to 8, Monday through Friday. Except during football season, there's a lot of football we cover. Carrie, I do the play-by-play for USJ football, who, by the way, will be taking on, they're number 1 in the state, and they'll be taking on number 3, Nashville Christian, coached by the former Commodore Jeff Brothers.
Thanks, my friend.
I hadn't met him before. I hadn't met him before. I think I'm going to look him up at the game Friday.
You should do that.
I think I'll do that. All right. Well, that's all I got.
All right. He's Seabass. I'm Chris Lee, host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you again later in the week.